The real impact of DEI in gaming. O dobra, to mamy materiał o woke. Ty, chyba dzisiaj będziemy oglądać 2 materiały o woke, ale ten w ogóle on inną miniaturę miał wcześniej. Dlaczego artyzm umiera w grach? Dawaj, zobaczymy, bardzo ciekawy jestem.
Oh boy, I guess we're doing this. I've tried to do my best to navigate the waters of social sensitivity, but there is so much intellectual dishonesty on both sides of the aisle that very little progress is ever made.
A ja wam muszę powiedzieć coś ciekawego. I ostatnio miałem okazję porozmawiać z nauczycielką z nawet kilkudziesięcioletnim stażem i zapytałem się, jak wygląda sprawa, wiadomo, to co teraz mówię będzie bardziej anegdotyczne. Jak wygląda sprawa młodzieży teraz, jak ona na to patrzy i mi powiedziała, że ona bardzo mocno widzi to, że młodzież jest po prostu o wiele mniej odporna na stres, o wiele gorsza w relacjach społecznych. Giga ciekawe. I to jest to, o czym on w ogóle, ja wam cofnę, nie? Żebyście zobaczyli, co on w ogóle powiedział na początku.
I guess we're doing this. I've tried to do my best to navigate the waters of social sensitivity, but there is so much
No, mogę pierdolić jak boomer teraz, ale wrażliwość społeczna powoli zaczyna zakrawać i absurd, no nie? No bo ja też jestem milenialcem. Wiecie, ja już skończyłem 30 lat i też wiemy, jak to u nas wygląda, bo u nas to było trochę w drugą, stronę przegięte. Kto z was gadał z ojcem, nie? No nie oszukujmy się. Każdy wie, jak to wyglądało. Ale czy nie jesteśmy teraz na takim etapie, że ludzie są zbyt wrażliwi społecznie? Że to już dochodzi do takiego momentu, gdzie my za jakiś czas dosłownie zbierzemy się do tego żniwa, bo można być wrażliwym, można być empatycznym, ale gdzie pojawia się to jako problem, jeżeli staje się to wymówką albo głównym trzonem, nie? No, my ze skrajności w skrajność weszliśmy. No ja na przykład w tym roku to w ogóle jeszcze było. Ja dużo Bukowskiego czytałem. I no Bukowski, to po kilku jego książkach jesteś w stanie całą jego analizę personalną osoby w ogóle wysnuć. No Bukowski bardzo dużo pisał teraz by się to nazywało taką toksyczną męskością, prawda? O tym, jak on zawsze musiał komuś udowodnić, że jest lepszy, że da radę, że czegoś nie odpuści, jak go to wyniszczyło wewnątrz, no nie? Na to też się źle patrzy. W naszych czasach już było trochę lepiej, nie? Ale teraz to w drugą stronę jest całkowicie przegięte, no nie? No nie wiem, przeczytajcie sobie z Szynką Raz albo Bukowski o kobietach, to zobaczycie co działo się w głowie facetów, którzy byli wychowani w czasach, w których nigdy nie mogli pokazać słabości, bo to były takie czasy. Mi się wydaje, że nasze czasy, w sensie te, w których ja się wychowywałem, akurat nam trochę na to pozwalały, ale zaczynamy robić trochę kult słabości. Z tego jak Tako kiedyś powiedział, no nie? Licytujemy się i wygrywa ten, kto przegrał. A to jest absurdalne, no nie? To jest totalnie absurdalne. Nie wiem, jak wy to widzicie. Dajcie znać w komentarzach, ale w złą stronę to idzie. Pierdolę jak boomer, ale zdroworozsądkowo pierdolę. Dobra, oglądają materiał.
Intellectual dishonesty on both sides of the aisle that very little progress is ever made, and oftentimes genuine criticism is lost in translation. DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, has very much become the boogeyman that is haunting the video game industry, slowly eroding our trust and interest in a lot of games.
Dzięki, łysy bubr.
It's penetrated discussions around the quality of games, character designs, narratives, heck, even how we play games.
Ja też bardzo często to powtarzam. Wiadomo, to jest frazer taki populistyczny. Trudne czasy tworzą silnych ludzi, silni ludzie tworzą dobre czasy tworzą słabych ludzi, a słabe ludzie tworzą trudne czasy. Niestety na tym etapie jesteśmy chyba na dobrych czasach, które wytworzyły słabych ludzi. Cieszę się, że załapałem się na trochę wcześniejszy element, no nie? Mam 27 lat, rozmawiam z wieloma młodymi osobami i widzę, że mamy strasznie kruche społeczeństwo. Wiecie, ja na przykład jako streamer nie widzę za bardzo tego etapu kruchego społeczeństwa, bo raczej ludzie w internecie tworzą takie alter ego, tworzą jakieś takie persony. Ja osobiście nie jestem w stanie tego zobaczyć. Nie, też nie oszukujmy się, ile wy macie lat, nie? Większość z was to oglądających ten content to raczej starsi, nie? Zresztą po statystykach na YouTubie to widać, że największa grupa odbiorca moich to jest 35-44, nie? Chyba tak. Nie, sorry, 28-35, a druga 35, chyba 40 ileś, nie? No dobra, oglądajmy dalej.
The first place.
Ile on się
And these
lat
are all
napisze
valid
na czacie?
criticisms to make because at the end of the day, we're buying a video game, not a social manifesto. I want more people to feel like they belong because they do belong. From my perspective, regardless of your nationality, gender, or identity, you're a gamer in my eyes. This isn't about not wanting people in games. This is about being sick and tired of watching companies commoditize people's identities and then go and use them as a shield for bad products. I'm sick of it. While social responsibility and representation is important, at the end of the day, the transaction that's happening is for engagement, entertainment, and enjoyment, and that's being lost. Today, what I want to do is I want to talk about the real impacts of DEI in gaming. What it is, what it's doing, and where it's going. Video games have always been a controversial medium, partly because they cater to such a wide variety of audiences. Historically, games have been made for children, teens, and adults, which naturally invites conflict and criticism. You have games for all kinds of people, regardless of age, race, gender, or identity, all with different interests, preferences, and expectations. This creates a wide range of opinions and voices about what games should be and what they represent, and oftentimes, those opinions clash. Games are also divided by genre, making the industry even more fragmented. You got players that love action games, role-playing games, sports simulations, or fighting games, all of these different types of players that are coming to the table with different needs and desires. And when games tackle touchy subjects like violence or sexuality, the controversy only grows.
Poczekaj. To jest gra twórców Stellar Blade'a pierwsza, nie? Jak ona się nazywa? Nike. Nie, ona się tak nazywa jakoś.
When games tackle touchy subjects like violence or sexuality, the controversy only grows. Take, for example, Grand Theft Auto with its portrayal of crime and violence, or the Dead or Alive series with its over-the-top sexualized characters. These games have sparked outrage, not just from players, but from outside groups like parents, politicians,
ale to jest ciekawe, co on porusza, ale to też będzie anegdotyczne. Nie poprę wam teraz tego żadnymi badaniami, ale jeżeli trzyma się dziecko pod kloszem przez 18 lat, jaki jest outcome tego, waszym zdaniem? Bo ciężko to zbadać, ale jaki jest zazwyczaj outcome tego, że ktoś jest trzymany pod kloszem i mu się nic nie pokazuje? Kończy 18 lat. Wycofanie społeczny, płatek śniegu. Ja bym powiedział, że taka osoba wychodzi i zaczyna szaleć i robić wszystko, kurwa, czego nie mogła robić, nie? Spuszczony ze smyczy, no. I często to też na przykład było widoczne, jak obserwowało się ludzi z grup mormońskich, tak? To były mormońskie? Nie, amiszowych. Bo amisze, nie? Chyba mają w swoją kulturę wpisane to, że oni nie korzystają z unowocześnień świata, ale pozwala im się raz opuścić ten świat. No, na pewno są badania na ten temat, jakieś takie głębsze, jak to wygląda, ale no, czy unikanie ciężkich tematów sprawia, że one przestają istnieć? Nie. Oczywiście, że nie.
Media pundits, many of whom don't even play video games, but still have strong opinions, assuming that all games are made for kids. But as the industry has grown, so has its core audience. Many of the people that started playing games as kids are now adults, and they're expecting more mature and complex content. However, as these companies are now seeking to widen their audiences and maximize their profits, they've started to blur the line between who games are made for, which is causing even more friction. Games that were once aimed at a specific group now try to appeal to everyone, and this can result in a mess of conflicting ideas, especially when it comes to the growing influence of diversity, equity, and inclusion in video games. Today, DEI has become a hot topic in gaming. We see it in discussions around the failures of games like Concord and Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League, where forced inclusivity and awkward character designs have been called out by fans and critics alike. Now, all eyes are on the upcoming Dragon Age The Veilguard, which many fear could be the next casualty of heavy-handed DEI influence. Fans that worry about the game, like others before it, will fall victim to poorly executed, ham-fisted inclusivity that...
Ja się nie mogę doczekać tego Dragon Age'a, ja pierdolę. Serio, nie mogę się go totalnie doczekać. Spodziewam się, co dostaniemy. Ale najśmieszniejsze jest to, że bardzo dużo dziennikarzy się wypowiedziało, że to idzie w dobrą stronę. Że to jest stary, dobry Dragon Age, nie? Będziemy wracać do tych wszystkich artykułów, co? Czy będę ogrywał? Oczywiście.
It feels more like a corporate checkbox than a meaningful addition to its story and characters. It feels like a lot of these discussions peaked around 2020, which makes a lot of sense. The video game industry has grown exponentially over the years, overtaking movies, music, and television. And with that came private equity. Most publicly traded companies saw their share prices double during the pandemic, and with that came more investors and fiduciary responsibility. These companies are now expected to grow, not just in projects, but in employees, sales, and audiences. Whereas earlier in this industry's life, they could be casual, jeans at work, gamers making games for gamers. Now the industry leaders need to tighten their tie and show they are worth their money. This brings us to the idea of corporate social responsibility, or CSR, and how DEI fits into that. See, what a lot of people don't talk about is that CSR is the concept that many companies should do more than just chase profits. It's part of their social image to their stakeholders. They're expected to contribute to the greater good by being ethical, environmentally friendly, and socially responsible. DEI is a part of that.
Zajebiście, ja robię wszystko totalnie w drugą stronę. Ja prezentuję styl złego prowadzenia się.
Paper, it's about making sure that companies are fair, inclusive, and representative of everyone, and that's not inherently bad. But here's the catch. While CSR and DEI are good in theory, they're often used by corporations to make more money. Governments offer tax breaks, grants, and other financial incentives to companies that follow CSR guidelines, and over time, companies simply just comply to maximize their revenue and avoid fines and potential lawsuits. So instead of implementing DEI initiatives out of a genuine desire for inclusivity, many companies are simply doing it just to get those benefits. This leads to a lot of issues in creative industries because this not only affects their approach to hiring and management, but also their games, leading to games that feel hollow with characters, stories, and designs that seem more focused on meeting corporate goals than delivering a valuable experience. Anyone who's watching this video right now that's like me, who's worked at a company at a corporate level, knows how these companies view CSR or DEI. They don't care about it. They feign it to the public, joke about it behind closed doors, and oftentimes only comply because they are absolutely terrified of HR lawsuits since Me Too, or they just don't want to get bent over by environmental agencies like the EPA or workers' safety and OSHA because those fines are millions of dollars. It's all a racket. It's a cold corporate response to heavy-handed regulation. As an example, in the US, we have OSHA, and it has a metric that's called TRIR, Total Recordable
OSHA to jest BHP, nie?
Injury Rate. It's a made-up score that levies the amount of injuries that you've had in a year and puts it into a pretty little equation and pops out a number. And if construction contractors even want to bid, I'm not even talking about work, I'm just saying bid on work. For most facilities, they have to be below a certain score. When you have companies that are out there that have tens of thousands of employees, accidents are bound to happen. And with such strict rules in place, they often find ways to blame employees, fire injured employees, or hide injuries to be able to protect themselves. Or in most cases, what they do is they lean on consulting companies, a multi-billion-dollar industry of companies that's ran by the self-same people that made the rules in the first place. DEI has its own racket. The DEI consulting industry is valued at $97.2 in 2023 and is projected to reach $131.1 billion by 2031. Snake oil salesmen developing new terms and sensitivity training to scare companies into using their services to keep them safe from regulators and lawsuits. You know, we've seen both games media and consultancy agencies say some pretty outrageous things over the last few years. So I want to ask you this. Do you think that these regulators and these consultancy agencies actually want people to get along? Do you think it really is about sensitivity? Because from my perspective, it looks like division is a very lucrative industry. You know, right now we have a lot of publishers and studios that are making a ton of money, billions of dollars. They're overtaking other industries. That's inviting in a lot of investors. And these companies have to show that they're growing. They got to show that they can make more money in the future. So these companies are triple dipping. They're going in, they're checking boxes for tax advantages. They are bringing in these consultancy agencies to make sure they're above board. And on top of that, they're using these oversafe work practices to try to make sure that they can avoid any lawsuits. They're trying to protect their money as much as they can and grow it as much as they can. But at the end of the day, the products that we're receiving are a product of that workplace. Now, this isn't to say that the people that are taking advantages of these programs, specifically
Pracuję w ASO marki Premium. Szukam od pół roku osoby na stanowiska ESR-a, wsparcie serwisu kontrakty. I nic nie możemy znaleźć, bo centrala nakazała zatrudnić kobietę. A najlepsze jest to, że nie może to być napisane w ogłoszeniu, nie? To działa niesamowicie. No bo nie możesz napisać ogłoszenia, że chcesz zatrudnić kogoś danej płci, no nie? To jest niezłe.
like grants and things like that, don't deserve that grant or don't deserve the position that they got as a result of it. I think a lot of people fail to recognize or conveniently forget that you have to have the grades to be able to get through these programs in the first place and to graduate to actually even get the job. And when it comes to actual diversity hiring, I don't think there's probably anybody that's out there that thinks that they were hired or even knows that they were hired because they were there to check a box. These are suits. These are CEOs that only care about growing profits and their own personal image. They're looking at this like a two-pronged approach. They're
Wiecie,
doing
co
it
w dzisiejszych czasach robią ogarnięte firmy? Serio? Ze spełnianiem wszystkich standardów DEI, które są na przykład odgórnie gdzieś narzucone? Najbardziej ogarnięte firmy, albo najbardziej ogarnięci szefowie, albo menadżerzy, którzy faktycznie zatrudniają albo odpowiadają za dużą ilość osób, tworzą stanowiska, które wyglądają na takie, które by były potrzebne, no i pali się pieniądze w taki sposób. Tworzysz nowe stanowisko, które nie ma realnego wpływu na funkcjonowanie w danym dziale i zatrudnia się osoby właśnie z listy typowo na takie stanowiska, ale oni nie mają tak naprawdę realnego wpływu na firmę. Tak to się robi. I są firmy, które faktycznie tak robią.
games, and they're doing it to their workplace. They're hiring in people that don't have the merit, they don't have the skill, but they don't really care about that because as long as they're there, well, they can get the tax break. They have the numbers that they need to actually have to either show to regulators or to show to their board of directors or whatever it might be. And then at the same time, they're using the same ideology, these same practices that are being taught to them by consultancy agencies in their video games to try to grow their audience beyond what it is. And it's going to impact the quality of your games when you do that for long enough, often enough. And I think one of the reasons why we've seen so much of it recently is because the games that we're getting are coming from that growth initiative. They're coming from the time where the video game industry really boomed. And that's why we're seeing a lot of games that are coming out that just lack quality at the end of the day. I'm not even talking about the ideology or messaging. I'm just talking about just the general quality of games that are delivered, how buggy they are, frame rate issues, all kinds of different problems. When you have companies that are this big, that have this big of issues, well, their problems become apparent pretty quick. Thomas Mahler, studio lead behind Ori and the Blind Forest and their upcoming game No Rest for the Wicked, responded to a comment from Elon Musk that simply said, DEI kills art. Mahler wrote, I've never retweeted anything from Elon before because I'm a game designer, but I very much agree with this statement. The problem with DEI isn't in its principle, but it's in the way it's being implemented. Years before DEI became a thing, we had Quentin Tarantino, a white director, make a movie about a badass black dude who buddied up with a white dude. My point being, just let artists be artists and DEI will happen naturally. Ultimately, a good message has to come from the heart and not from indoctrination. And I think this is the heart of the issue.
Ja wam powiem coś ciekawego. Zastanówcie się, czy jeżeli mielibyście zrobić coś kreatywnego, artystycznego, powiedzmy kreatywnego dla uproszczenia, ale ktokolwiek inny wam narzuca formę, zasady albo treść, jaką macie przekazać, czy staje się to 100% waszym przekazem? Czy staje się to waszą kreatywnością? I odpowiedź jest prosta. Nie. Nigdy. Dlatego mnie zawsze śmieszy to, jak ktoś mówi, dostałem ten produkt za darmo, ale to jest moje zdanie. Nie, bo tu już masz świadomość tego, że ktoś to słyszy. Ja to po sobie widzę, bo ja wam nie będę walił w chuja. Jak do mnie przychodzi jakaś firma, żebym zrobił playthrough z ich gierki i nawet nie mam żadnego skryptu, no nie? Tylko mam totalnie lightowo pograć w jakąś gierkę. To moja świadomość tego, że deweloper tej gry to ogląda, już przyczynia się do tego, że ja się inaczej wyrażam. Ja mam przekaz cały czas ten sam, ale on ma zmienioną formę. On ma lżejszą formę, no nie? Ja, wiecie, no nie jestem osobą, która weźmie pieniądze, żeby wam powiedzieć, że coś, co jest gówniane, jest dobre. Poza tym to jest nielegalne, nie mógłbym tak zrobić, ani nikt nie mógłby mi złożyć takiej propozycji. Ale nawet jak oglądałem Star Wars Outlaws i ja wiedziałem, że jestem największym streamem w Polsce ze Star Wars Outlaws i wiedziałem o tym, że dostałem klucz od Ubisoftu, bo sam Ubisoft do mnie napisał, czy nie chciałbym od nich klucza, czy będę streamował tą grę i że Ubisoft ma polski dział. To ja wiedziałem, że polski dział nie ogląda przy Ubisoftie, no nie? Co prawda to jest chyba idealnie potwierdzenie na to, że we mnie wcisnę chłamu i pojechałem z tą grą jak z totalną kurwą, jaką jest. No nie oszukujmy się, gra jest szmatą do podłogi niczym więcej, ale masz cały czas tą świadomość z tyłu głowy, nie? I tak to dokładnie wygląda.
Because that's what it feels like. Many people have grown up, like myself, being taught that everyone is human. Identities are a feature. Character is the person. But over the last few years, it feels like people want to rewrite that, making someone's outward appearance and their lineage the only thing that matters. And if you question it from the perspective of equality, you're chastised.
Co jest głównym tematem przewodnim postaci Fan 9 Awakening? Ich pochodzenie. Co to jest za postać, której... No to jest... Kim jest dziewczyna, która tylko ładnie wygląda? No proszę was.
By developers, the media, and those who don't care for nuance. I've said it before, I'll say it
ktoś taki
again.
ma jakąś
This is being
osobowość?
pushed
No
by
nie.
people that lack the care, talent, class, and most importantly, the
Dziękuję,
character
patron.
to be able to tell diverse stories or represent a variety of people. If employees are demanded to make characters, stories, and games that appeal to specific identities alone, games aren't being made organically. They're coming off a factory press, molded to
Tak,
suit
no.
whatever a marketing department's
Całkowicie to psy organiczność. Zgadzam się, kurwa, 100%.
idea of diversity is. Gay characters with half-shaved and colored hair, the token black character with the same haircut from an urban upbringing backed by a hip-hop soundtrack, and the evil white villain. We see it across all forms of media. It's unoriginal, it's tacky, it's offensive, and it's done for all the wrong reasons. Sweet Baby Incorporated, a narrative consulting company that has become infamous for pushing some of the most extreme and heavy-handed DEI initiatives in gaming. The company has
Dobre,
made
no.
headlines
To jest dobre. Co chce Sweet Baby, co chce zrobić? Spalić branżę do cnaku. Po czym ostatnio oglądaliśmy wypowiedź, jak to oni są pokrzywdzeni, jak to gracze ich nie zaatakowali.
for pushing some of the most extreme and heavy-handed DEI initiatives in gaming. The company has made headlines not for their approach to storytelling, but for the lack in quality of games that they've consulted on and the controversial statements from its leaders that show just how little integrity this company has. A figure from Sweet Baby Incorporated went as far to say that marketing teams need to be terrified of the consequences if they don't make their games culturally sensitive, implying that fear and coercion should drive creative decisions rather than genuine artistic expression. Perhaps one of the more revealing statements came from one of their leaders giving a presentation saying their ultimate goal was to burn the industry to the ground. These extreme views highlight just how far removed this company is from the art and value that developers bring. Instead of enhancing the
Mi
creative
się w ogóle podoba dobór słów. Safer world, burning games industry to the ground. Giga safe. Powiem wam, że jeżeli ktokolwiek wie trochę o historii, to mieliśmy już kilku takich gagatków, co stwierdzili, że dla dobra wszystkich muszą z wszystkimi innymi rzeczami sobie poradzić w ciekawy sposób. Kreatywny może to nazwijmy, bezpieczny tak będzie, nie? O, już takie sytuacje w Europie miały miejsce wcześniej, nawet nie tak dawno.
far removed this company is from the art and value
O,
that
jak
developers
kurwa wyszło, to
bring.
każdy
Instead
chyba
of
wie.
enhancing the creative process or developing authentic, meaningful stories, their approach is rooted in pushing divisive ideologies and using scare tactics to remain relevant as the consulting industry makes billions.
Ej, ale wiecie, co jest kurwa najlepsze? Sposób, w jaki wychodzi na przykład takie Sweet Baby, albo jak wychodzi dużo osób, to ludzie chcą, żeby był robiony tylko ich przekaz i żeby tylko takie gry miały miejsce. A ja mam zupełnie inaczej. Ja chcę, żeby gry DEI cały czas powstawały. Ja chcę cyklicznie grać w grę pokroju Unknown Nine Awakening. Ja chcę, żeby te gry miały miejsce. Wiecie dlaczego? Dla mnie są zajebistym contentem. Naprawdę. Mi nie przeszkadza, że takie gry powstają, bo nikt nie jest zmuszony do ich kupowania. Mnie wkurza, jak te idee są przenoszone na marki, na których mi zależy. Serio. Mnie wkurza to, jak firmy, które kiedyś robiły dobre gry, na siłę forsują te idee, co sprawia, że te gry są po prostu chujowe. No nie oszukujmy się, takie są. Ale ja nadal chcę mieć dostęp do rzeczy kategorii B, C i D. No to jest absurdalnie zabawne. Ja nie chciałbym, żeby na świecie... Wyobraźcie sobie sytuację, że na świecie są tylko dobre filmy. Nie możemy do tego dopuścić, bo jeżeli wszystko będzie dobre, to nic nie będzie dobre. Zawsze coś musi wychodzić ponad jakiś stan, nie? Ja na przykład uwielbiam horrory klasy B, takiej totalnie niższej kategorii. Filmy, które ja oglądam, mają średnią ocenę na Filmwebie, nie wiem, 4 na 10. Ja uwielbiam, serio. Ja takie gry jak Unknown Nine uwielbiam to grywać, więc ja się zajebiście przy tym bawię. Ten Unknown Nine to był świetny gameplay, nie? Ale no nie chciałbym, żeby były tylko dobre gry. Tylko niech oni nie forsują tych idei na dobre gry.
And using scare tactics to remain relevant as the consulting industry makes billions of dollars a year. Just look at the way that people are represented in these games and what game.
Weźcie to na przykład przyłóżcie do tego, co ja mówiłem wcześniej. Ja nie mam problemu z tym, że takie rzeczy mają miejsce, tylko niech są robione pod to nowe marki. Ja jestem giga zadowolony, jeżeli jest nowa marka jakaś wypuszczana i są tam przerzucane takie rzeczy. Bo ja wiem, że ja nic na tym nie tracę teoretycznie, nie? To jest zajebiste. Ja chciałbym, żeby Blizzard wypuścił na przykład nowego hack and slasha, nie Diablo. I żeby był tak samo chujowy jak Diablo 4. Ja się będę świetnie przy tym bawił. Niech to robią, essa, ale niech nie niszczą marek, których po prostu już nie rozumieją, które są swego rodzaju, kurwa, świętością. Dla mnie takie Diablo 1, Diablo 2 to jest produkt święty. To jest święty graal hack and slashy, nie?
Games they're doing it in and tell me why people shouldn't get upset. Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League, a game aimed at DC comic fans and young men, making journal entries about Wonder Woman and...
No, a teraz właśnie zadajmy sobie pytanie, dlaczego oni te rzeczy robią na istniejących markach, a nie na stałych, no, nie na starych markach, w sensie, a nie na nowych markach? Bo są świadomi tego, że nowa marka się tak nie sprzeda. Oni, no przecież widzą te wyniki sprzedażowe. Widzą, jak taki Suicide Squad poszedł, prawda? Widzą, jak poszedł jak poszedł Dustborn. Widzą, jak poszedł, nie wiem, Unknown 9. Oni wiedzą, że to nie działa, oni wiedzą, że to nie wypali, ale muszą to mieć. Tylko, że jak to będzie długofalowo wyglądało, jak wszystkie marki zostaną zajechane w taki sposób? No niedobrze, no niedobrze. Czy wy się 2 razy zastanowicie przed kupnem Diablo 5? No oczywiście. Czy wy kupiliście... Powiedzcie mi, ilu z was kupiło Diablo 4, ale nie kupiło już DLC-ka? Serio. Napiszcie mi, przecież jestem ciekawy, nie? No. I dokładnie o to, kurwa, chodzi.
Oppressive toxic masculinity, retconning Mr. Freeze into Miss Freeze, creating an abomination in character design, all the while delivering horrible gameplay in an uninspired shooter. These are things that customers didn't knowingly sign up for when they purchased the game. Many believe that they were buying a game from a beloved studio who developed award-winning titles. That's not what they got. Take Concord, a game that was criticized well before its release for its awkward attempt at forced diversity. The marketing felt contrived, a Marvel knockoff, highlighting character designs that seemed to tick boxes rather than focusing on the game's actual content, which shone through because once the game was released, it was a game that was too busy trying to be safe that it appealed to nobody. A game that came from PlayStation, where players are invested in their platform and have high expectations for high-quality games, only to find out that this is what PlayStation's leadership thinks of their fans and what their investment is worthy of. A lot of people have dunked on Dustborn, a game that felt more like a caricature of diversity rather than a game aimed at a genuine audience, one that was heavily criticized for how poor of a job it pretended to do representing the people that it was apparently made for. Social criticisms aside, its developer actually admitted in a recent interview that they knew that people don't like their games and they knew that people wouldn't like this game. Yet somehow they're astonished by the backlash for how ridiculous the game was. My biggest criticism here is the fact that this developer, the studio lead, knew that this game wasn't going to make any money. They knew that it was a game that nobody wanted, and they took millions of dollars in government assistance to make it. Taxpayer dollars that could have gone to a different Norwegian studio to make a game that people actually wanted. We're now seeing developers shoehorn ideologies and diversity into their video games without any regard for context, narrative integrity, or the desires of their audience.
Słuchaj, widzu. Jak mi ktoś by dał $14 milionów, żebym sobie stworzył jakąś grę z konkretną narracją, to bym to zrobił. I wy też byście to zrobili.
Completely ignoring those things. Take infamous examples like characters being redesigned or elements being removed from remasters or remakes purely to fit modern DEI standards. Lara Croft, Silent Hill 2, whether it's changing character models, gender, or backstory, not to serve the plot, but for a specific agenda. It all results in tokenism, where characters become caricatures of the very identities they're supposed to represent. Instead of nuanced, well-rounded individuals, we get stereotypes, over-the-top, one-dimensional characters that feel more like corporate creations than artistic expressions. It's no wonder that players are frustrated. When we're buying a game, we are entering into an exchange where we are giving our money and expecting a product that was crafted with care, creativity, and respect for the audience. But that respect isn't there anymore. Instead, what we are seeing more and more is the injection of forced messaging, hamstringing the creative process. Games that are starting to feel more like manufactured products made to meet quotas and marketing objectives rather than passion projects that are inviting gamers, inviting players into engaging and meaningful worlds. The issue with DEI isn't about the principles themselves, it's about how it's being implemented. Like Thomas Mahler said, DEI will happen naturally if artists are allowed to be artists. The problem arises when corporate interests take over and diversity becomes a commodity to sell rather than a genuine attempt to reflect on the world that we live in. It leads to a disconnect between players and the games, and ultimately between the creators and their audience. And I think that's a fair and valid criticism to make because it's something observable. We can see it happening in the industry today. And while we've had a lot of games...
Nie no, wczoraj czytaliśmy post o tym, że to jest grifting. To on jest grifterem teraz, nie? Według najnowszych definicji. Bo wypowiada się na takie tematy. To jest grifting i tyle. I nie można podnosić głosu względem tego, co się dzieje. Nie można zauważyć pewnych schematów, pewnych standardów, które są narzucane i tyle.
...that have come out, absolutely incredible games. At the same time, the reason why players are so upset, the reason why this is such a popular talking point is because it's happening within the foundation of the industry. It's happening to the companies that are the very pillars that elevated the industry. The companies that made the games that made us gamers, Activision, EA, Blizzard, Xbox, PlayStation, the list goes on. We get why they're doing it. It's all for money. But the funny thing is that they're losing a lot of it doing what they've been doing.
Długofalowo na pewno tracą.
You know, I've noticed over the last couple of years, some of these breakout successes that we've seen have reached incredible heights that I don't think that they would have reached if it wasn't for the fact that the industry is in the state that it's in. They created this situation. They swung the pendulum in one direction and now it's stuck. And because of that, their competition is getting richer by the day. They're getting more fans. They're getting more support. And it's going to make it even more difficult for some of these companies to be able to back out of the position that they're in. Baldur's Gate 3, Black Myth Wukong, Stellar Blade, Space Marine 2, Helldivers 2, Pal World. There's a huge list of games that we've seen come out over the last couple of years that have been absolute bangers. And there's an ocean of difference with the quality and feel of those games and some of these patronizing attempts at guilting us out of our money. Even more so, games that are putting themselves in a position that we feel guilty for trying to voice our criticisms on. And they really like that last part. Us not wanting to voice our criticisms. Characters, identities, DEI, none of these things were dominant talking points in the gaming industry before because, to be quite frank, nobody cared or noticed. Games were seen as a universal medium where anyone could find something to enjoy. In the past, developers didn't feel the need to loudly proclaim that their game was diverse. It was just a natural part of the storytelling. Characters were designed to fit the narrative or the gameplay, not to check boxes for representation. This allowed games back then to thrive creatively with unique and varied experiences that applied or appealed to different audiences. And I think that's the most important part. Not every game was made for everyone, but there was always something to find for everyone. Players simply just connected with characters, or they ignored the ones that they didn't relate to, and the focus always remained on the game's quality rather than the demographic that they were trying to reach. It's only in recent years that character identities have been pushed to the forefront, making DEI feel constant, this forced presence in every conversation, often distracting from the core of what games are supposed to be, engaging, fun, and worth our money. Now, identity is the only thing people talk about. Now, this may come as a surprise to a lot of people, but genuine racism, bigotry, and hate actually exist. There are studios and developers today that are under a constant barrage of hate from fans and people that will never even play their games. Just recently, I watched a panel that was criticizing comments that were made by the studio head of Tales of Kanzera Zhao. The studio ended up announcing their hiatus due to the game's poor performance. A game that ultimately failed because of its deep ties to Sweet Baby Incorporated, that already generated a lot of distrust, and also it was being praised and promoted by the least trustworthy people in games media. The studio's lead, Abubakar Salim, back in May, spoke in a video about how often he's been told that he hasn't earned his position, how he's faced prejudice and attacks, and it actually felt like a genuine heart-to-heart, only for the video to end with him announcing a promotion for the game and it being heavily discounted, evaporating any goodwill that the video was supposed to represent and ultimately making it feel like a marketing scheme.
Kurwa, co? To smukle do tego to ja chyba nad swoim marketingiem muszę trochę popracować.
The panel who chose to criticize Salim, made up of a few well-known figures on Twitter, instead of making thoughtful criticisms, only chose to mention things like Rafiki when making fun of the way that he dressed, or saying that he's never met his father when he mentioned his dad passing away, and that the studio should have been called Spear Chucker Studio. It's disgusting, abhorrent, blatant racist behavior that belongs nowhere near and does not represent any of the genuine
Ale poczekaj, z jedną rzeczą tutaj muszę się nie zgodzić. To, czy przekręcanie nazwy studia, czy wyśmiewanie się z czyjejś tragedii jest moralnie akceptowalne, czy nie? to sami sobie musicie odpowiedzieć na to pytanie, ale to nie ma nic wspólnego z rasizmem. Rasizm jest zjawiskiem, który raczej ma korzenie w innej formie. Nawet nie wiem, jak to określić w ładny sposób, ale rasizm raczej skupia się na innych elementach. A to, czy te dyskusje albo czy takie przekręcanie biorą się z rasizmu, to druga sprawa. Ale no jeżeli ktoś cię wyzywa, to nie jest to związane z tym, że jest rasistą. Ktoś może cię po prostu zwyzywać.
Only chose to mention things like Rafiki when
A to, czy on już będzie na przykład miał jakieś takie konotacje, bo sam z siebie będzie rasistą, to jest druga sprawa. Ale no jeżeli, no kurwa, wiecie o co chodzi, nie?
making fun of the way that he dressed or saying that he's never met his
Nie, no, naśmiewanie się z sposobu, w jaki ktoś jest ubrany, nie jest w ogóle rasistowskie. Czy jest na miejscu? Nie jest, kurwa. Ale czy jest rasistowskie? Nie jest.
father when he mentioned his dad passing away and that the studio should have been called Spear Chucker Studio. It's disgusting, abhorrent, blatant racist behavior that belongs nowhere near and does not represent any of the genuine criticisms that we've had for either Surgeon Studios, Abubakar Salim, or Tales of Kanzara Zhao, or the rest of the industry for that matter. I hate it because we exist in this weird place where, because of social media, the most outrageous opinions catch the most eyes, where comments like the ones that I just mentioned become the blanket scapegoat for genuine criticism. We have journalists and developers that are out there talking about how hateful gamers are. We have articles written about how Helldivers 2 was somehow promoting fascism, even though it was a handful of edgelords in a Discord. We have the senior editor of Kotaku on a public showcase telling people that she wants to fight them physically if they don't like the direction of games today. We have Forbes writing articles about Dragon Age the Veilguard, preemptively hand-waving any criticisms for what they call the modernized character creator and
Ja wam coś pokażę. Arkadikus dzisiaj wysłał coś takiego. Kurwa, to jest giga zabawny emo. Arkadikus tym dzisiaj wysłał, że dostał taką wiadomość, no nie? Patrzcie na to. A propos dziennikarzy. Jako dziennikarz growy mam dość sprzątania po waszym rozpowszechnianiu dezinformacji. Jako niedziennikarz, a gracz mam dość sprzątania po waszym rozpowszechnianiu dezinformacji, szczególnie jeśli chodzi o jakość gier. Arku, o jakie dezinformacje chodzi? Nie wiem, myślałem, że się zaczepiamy tak bez argumentów. Od tego zaczęła się dyskusja. Ty, youtuber Kiszak, monetyzujecie hejt i wprowadzacie ludzi w błąd, że woke niszczy gry. Zastanów się czasami, czy to, co robisz, nie jest szkodliwe. Obejrzałem dużo twoich filmów. Jak dla mnie nie zrobiłeś nic dobrego dla branży. Po czym Arkadikus odpisał. Frazesy, a zero konkretów. Cienko jak na dziennikarza. Nawet gamingowego. Więcej szkody widzę w dziennikarzach gotowych, którym bardziej zależy, chyba growych miało być, którym bardziej zależy na wydawcach niż graczach. Jeśli ktoś robi szkodę branży, to ufer pozytywni właśnie dziennikarzy, którzy łykają wszystko pod przykrywką mi się podoba, zamiast rzucać konkretami, to odważni są jedynie przy małych wydawcach indie. Nigdy nic dobrego nie zrobiłem dla branży, to prawda, ale nigdy nic dobrego nie mówiłem, że zrobiłem. A co dobrego zrobili dziennikarze? Nawet Polish Hour Prize już Stop Killing Games jest inicjatywą oddaloną, a nie waszą. No, tak to wygląda.
gender selection because if you don't like it, don't use it. Yet women are criticizing the character creator because they don't feel represented by it. And now somehow they're a part of the angry, edgy gamer crowd? I think that the worst part of all of this is how often I see individuals or groups being blamed. No, it's the men that are spreading the hate. No, it's the liberal women that are ruining games. No, it's white privilege. No, it's minorities taking undeserved jobs. No, it's the straights. No, it's the gays, when in fact all of these issues are just plain old-fashioned corporate greed and corruption. It is consultancy industries that are made and managed by the governments that set the rules. It's large corporations hiring talentless, self-indulgent, bitter people because they need to check a box for tax incentives, using consultancy agencies to supplement their work at a lower rate and then train those self-same, talentless employees. Then those employees find their way into leadership roles and narrative positions, taking corporate initiatives for diversity on a ride, using it as their mark to be left on the world because without identity, their life has no meaning. It's corporations that have cultivated massive audiences, tens of millions of players who don't understand that those players have a limited amount of time and money, less so by the year. And they can't play every single game that's released, but they need to grow their audience. They need more players. They need more money. So they look to trends in other media. And they think, hey, you know what? My ultra masculine franchise about war and loss, you know what that needs? It needs a female lead to take the place of beloved male characters in a story about friendship and rainbows. That'll draw in the new demographics. We'll make posts on social media talking about how inclusive we are. We'll latch ourselves onto social causes, and then we will minimize and remove all of those elements when we go to sell it in a different country that doesn't share those values. So what's the impact of DEI on gaming? It's performative inclusivity for corporations and governments who have weaponized it to meet financial goals while ignoring the impact on the product or the audience. It's creating poorly executed games, surface-level attempts at diversity that are nothing more than transparent greed because we know that they don't care, and we see it in broad daylight. It's dividing the people in the gaming community, and it's being co-opted by Twitter engagement farmers and games media fanning the flames to keep the hatred going. Keep them mad, keep them fighting, because at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is that they stay relevant, and it's the only way that they can make money. It's about suppressing genuine criticism. It's about fragmenting communities. It's promoting ill will and bad ideologies on both sides of the aisle, and ultimately, it's making gaming worse. I think having discussions like these are incredibly important and constructive. And I think that's the most important part, is to have constructive conversations around these kind of issues, because I think more times than not, it's much easier to just point at one of these issues and tear it down and never really talk about anything else around it, the deeper meaning, where it comes from, what it's actually doing, what its intentions are, and things like that. And in this case, while I don't think that EA, Activision, Blizzard, Ubisoft, whoever else is going to be watching anything like this, I do think that the smaller studios, or the studios that we've been supporting, the ones that have been out there actually delivering high quality games that are worth our money, that we've been buying, that we've been enjoying, that have seen a ton of success, I do think that they are listening to things like these because they want to continue that success. And in a lot of ways, I think that they're going to be the changing of the old guard. I think that they're going to be taking the place of many of the companies that we see that are leading the industry today, because after a while, if they can't grow their profits and their games just don't speak to audiences anymore, they're going to be running into some problems. Good games win, bad games fail. It's the greatest time to be alive. This is one of the reasons why I said before it's the best time to be a gamer, is because, well, our money, our voting is working. And there's been a ton of games that we've been able to vote on over the last few years, and it's worked. You know, I've had a lot of people ask me why I'm so passionate about these kind of topics, or why I'm so passionate about gaming. It's just video games, dude. Calm down. I think in a lot of ways...
To jest coś, co mnie tak wkurwia. Wejdź na kanał, który związany jest z grami komputerowymi i miej problem z tym, że ktoś jest zapasjonowany grami komputerowymi i się przejmuje tym, w jaką stronę to idzie. No ja pierdolę, jakimś zjebem trzeba być, nie?
Is the reason why is because I view gaming as one of the last vestiges of an industry in which we can actually have any change happen. We can actually influence that industry. We can protect ourselves. We can protect our favorite hobby because of how young it is. It still is very young. It's not very set in its ways yet. While, yeah, there's a lot of investor money and things like that that are out there, this industry is a little bit more controlled because of, well, how the free market works. If we buy your game, you do well. If we don't buy your game, things aren't going to work out too well. And right now it's not working out.
Nawet tak jakby ilość kontentu, jaka jest wytwarzana wokół tych gier, jaki to ma ogromny wpływ, nie? Jak wiecie, osoby takie jak ja czy wy, którzy się wypowiadają na temat tych gier, piszą komentarze, dyskutują o nich, to też jest coś, co ma ogromny wpływ na to, jak dobrze sobie radzi ta branża i jak bardzo jest poniekąd kontrolowana przez nas. Zajebiście, no, gada.
Out very well for a few companies, Ubisoft being one of them. You know, the message will always be the same for me, and it's just that I genuinely do want more people to be involved in games. I want people to feel like they belong. And like I said earlier in the video, this isn't about hate. This isn't about trying to get people not in video games. This is about making sure that people are represented properly. And this is making sure that people aren't having their identities commoditized simply for the fact that these companies want to try to make more money off of you. And then on top of that, how often we see these companies and their two-faced tactics trying to talk about how they care about you, how they want to represent you, but the minute that they go to sell their game in China, Russia, or Saudi Arabia, all of a sudden,
oh God,
well, they forgot about you. Oh, I'm sorry, we left you behind.
No.
Like a Home Alone episode, or I guess that was actually a movie.
Yeah,
they have a TV show? I don't know. Anyway, we have a lot of games to vote on next year. I've been looking at the list of games that we have, and it's staggering. I thought that this year was stacked. Next year, it looks insane now. With some of the more recent reveals that we've seen, as well as just, you know, the big titles that we already knew were coming next year, it's going to be a crazy year. I'm going to be struggling to find the time. You're going to be struggling to find the time. So make sure you're picking wisely. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you guys take take the root message.
Kurwa, z grami jest taka największa różnica względem filmów, że raczej te popularne filmy się same napędzają. Ludzie chcą to zobaczyć. Ten bilet do kina jest na tyle tani, że nawet jak wiesz, że coś jest złe, ale jest popularne, to chcesz z tego skorzystać, nie? A w grach komputerowych jednak one są tak dużą częścią twojego czasu, że nie chcesz go tracić na coś, co jest złej jakości. W momencie, gdy gier jest o wiele więcej i o wiele łatwiej się też spędza czas w starych grach niż w starych filmach, no nie? Jak masz stary film, no to obejrzysz go sobie raz na jakiś czas i tyle. A jak masz starą grę, to do niej cały czas wracasz. I to jest coś, co jest świetnym narzędziem do kontrolowania tej branży. Jeżeli ogół wie, że dany produkt nie jest dobry, to nie spędzi w nim 100 godzin. To nie wyda na niego $60. A bardzo często też to, ile wy czasu spędzacie w grze, jest bardzo silnym motorem napędowym tego, ile inni wydają na tą grę, nie? I też ile wy wydajecie z uwagi na to, że wszędzie są jakieś wewnętrzne transakcje i gry są budowane wokół tych wewnętrznych transakcji. Więc nawet kupując grę, ale nie grając w nią cały czas, to deweloper bardzo dużo traci, ponieważ jest wprowadzany nowy content, który musi być jakoś zmonetyzowany. A film się monetyzuje raz. Znaczy, no chyba, że potem ewentualnie merchem, ale still.
To heart and understand that it's not necessarily DEI is the devil. It's just that the way that it's being implemented, how it's being abused, and how it's being corrupted is the issue.
Kurwa, ja tak powinienem siedzieć na tym materiale w okularach, nie?
Push back against those and the things that actually matter. That's the real point of this discussion. And instead of putting all of our focus on a single game developer or a journalist or something like that, well, I think it's really important to bring up the things that they discuss and to criticize those things. I think that in a lot of cases, what we need to be doing is putting most of our focus on the places that actually matters. That's these government programs, because that's where the root of all these issues really is. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys did, make sure to share this with your friends, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It'd be kind of crazy if you haven't subscribed already. I guess I'm already at 200,000 or almost at 200,000. I was planning on making a video about 100,000 subs, and well, that didn't happen. So I guess I'll have to figure something out soon. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. Stay cool, stay righteous, stay safe. Follow me on Twitch if you guys want to catch me live.
O, no to fajnie.